And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a special Weedy Emerging Technology Subworkgroup Virtual Spotlight Beyond CMS 0057, Unlocking the Full Value of Policy Digitization. It's my pleasure to introduce one of the Weedy Emerging Technology Subworkgroup co-chairs, Nick Radoff.
Hey, thanks, Michael. So, yes, my name is Nick Radoff. I am one of your emerging technology workgroup co-chairs. My day job, I'm a technical product manager at Steady, which is a programmable EDI clearinghouse. And today, I'm very pleased to introduce Sam Barber and Saul Howard from Anterior. So we first got connected with Anterior at a previous in-person Weedy meeting a few months back. So for anybody who has not attended any of those Weedy meetings yourself in person, highly encourage you to show up for those events. It's a great place to make some of those industry connections. So I know, a lot of us have been deeply focused on the recent CMS 0057F final rule requiring certain, payers' health plans to implement prior authorization burden reduction APIs, and that's all great. But a lot of those policies, it turns out, only exist, as long PDF documents or Word documents, or maybe in some archaic legacy system with certain coded data elements that nobody can really extract. So really, to get the full advantage of those new burn reduction APIs, we've really got to be able to automate those decisions on the payer side to be able to turn around the decisions quickly and avoid provider abrasion and delays in patient care. So I believe Sam and Saul from Anterior are going to tell us about some of the approaches they've been taking in that area. So guys, I'll turn it over to you. You should be presenters if you want to share something there.
Amazing. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate it. We're excited to chat today, and always a pleasure to be part of the Weedy community. And thank you for having us. Um, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining and taking the time. We're excited today to kind of, as Nick teed up, kind of zoom out a little bit, and talk about what it means to unlock the full value of policy digitization. Um, and ideally, we want folks on the call to leave today thinking maybe actually you're little bit closer to this holy grail of AI transformation in a broader sense than maybe you think. So, um, to introduce ourselves on the call, very quickly, I'm Sam Barber. I am VP Product here at Anterior. I sit over our AI platform and applied AI teams. In a previous life, I was at Google across various product teams, delivering technical transformations to enterprise customers. And there were a lot of valuable lessons, I think, in that world that we're excited to apply also to some of the work we do with payers. I'll let Saul introduce himself.
Thank you, Sam. Hello, everybody, and also very, very nice to be here. I'm Saul Howard, VP of Engineering at Anterior. I sit over the engineering team, software engineering team. In my previous life, I was at Apple Cloud, running teams in London and Cupertino, scaling out LLM infrastructure for iCloud. Yes. Back to you, Sam.
Amazing. Well, a little bit about Anterior. We as Nick said, we've met a lot of the folk on the call at last year's get together and through the Weedy community. But for those who don't know Anterior, we are a clinician-led AI company built specifically for health plans. And we build, deploy, and orchestrate AI to accelerate, automate, and improve health plan workflows. And we strongly believe really the only way we can achieve that goal as an organization is to assemble a team who is both healthcare native and AI native. So we're glad to have the I think impressive stat of 40% of our team being clinicians. And they're embedded in all parts of the organization, in products, engineering, the deployment teams, our strategists. And this allows us to apply the new technology of AI safely, both from a clinical standpoint, and also a security, privacy, scaling perspective. And only really the combination of these two, we believe, can lead to the safe adoption of AI transformation at scale within healthcare. And we cut our teeth, really, demonstrating that you can automate end-to-end workflows such as prior authorization by clinically reasoning accurately with AI. And we're very proud of the level of accuracy that we've approved as one of our case studies. We'll dive into a little bit later with some details that we've verified in production, safely delivering this goal of transformation safely for our customers in production. And the even better news, we think, is that it scales. The process, the underlying technology and deployment methodology. This allows for extremely high performance capability in a generalized sense across service line, workflow, and now use cases as well that we can touch on as well today. So to give a little bit of context about the way we think about designing solutions for these kind of problems, Anterior has built broadly two things. One are our AI actions. These are units of work that health plan staff do today, codified into code and the use of AI, orchestration of models and other techniques. We often describe them with our customers as kind of highly accurate Lego blocks to build up complex and bespoke workflows. And number two is our modular platform. And this is the infrastructure, the pipes, the evaluation, the safe handling of data that you need to use AI safely within a health plan. And these come together and are configured into a solution for our customers to deliver ROI using AI to solve a business problem. We're deployed with customers, including regional plans, nationals, delegated entities, across prior authorization that we started off our journey tackling, but taking these techniques and now alive with payment integrity use cases, care management, HEDIS, appeals and grievances, that we're very excited to see the impact of in production. So you can't really say prior authorization in a sentence to a customer without CMS-0057 looming large in the background. I'm sure that I'm preaching to the choir on that front. And this group especially, we all know and love the Da Vinci IGs, the CRD, DTR, PAS, the endpoints, the interactions. They're all kind of etched in our minds at this point. And DTR being viewed in the process as kind of this data gathering exercise, some formulation of questions, of inputs, uploads for the provider to complete. Usually what is determining this is found in the policy that would have been applied by a clinician on the payer side. And this has started a conversation that Anterior, I think we're very excited as originally sort of 3-4 years ago coming at this from a very different angle about the clinical reasoning aspect, started a conversation on digitizing policies. How do I digitize my policies? Should I use AI to do that? Is that safe? Is that wise? How do I manage this information once it's produced? What's the source of truth in my complex technical stack? Is this a new part of the stack that should be installed? Should this be part of something that I already have in my Fire server, etc.? Really interesting conversations. I think often after a little while, a lot of our customers in the past have said, this all sounds like a lot of resource and ongoing maintenance. Am I sure I'm getting the maximum value out of this process? I don't want to just get a compliance checkbox if I at the end of this work. I want to drive value. I want to improve the situation and the experience for my members, for my providers, for my staff. You know, can we think about the goal in that context, not just a checkbox of compliance? And I think also in the context of a lot of organizations going through a transformation of often, which is the kind of the most adjacent use case or department to these kind of this kind of compliance piece, which is touching on these same policies. You know, I want to use AI there. I want to automate processes. How do these things fit together? So before we dive in, I think my colleagues in sales would be not happy if I didn't make very clear that Anterior has implemented the CRD, DTR, PS APIs for multiple of our customers, and we're very proud of the policy and rule hosting and management solutions we have in a dedicated web application for these customers for them to manage together with our deployment teams that our customers use for the source of truth for this information. The delivery of these policies back in other mediums back to PDFs for other users or hosting on payers' websites for access by providers, and the kind of analytics of these use of these questionnaires. But today we don't want to get caught up in too much of that. We especially in this group we talk about it a lot, and this is the as Nick teed up, this is the emerging technology work group after all. So we want to try and take a bit of a step back and talk about policies at a little bit of a higher level. We support payers through large AI transformations across the business, across use cases, and to do that, we often take a step back and look at the systems and the context, history of why parts of that process exist in the first place, to understand how AI truly can be used to improve outcomes for payers, providers, and members. So if you'll indulge us a little today, we'd love to do the same with policies. Humans have been trying to codify some rules with consistent application of them in complex systems for thousands of years. And if we go back and think about how that's evolved over time, kind of what can that tell us about how we should think about policies? So this was an interesting example that we were talking about in the office the other month, and this was the very first example that's been discovered of humans trying to codify policies. It was thousands of years ago in Babylon. And this is an engraved stone. It was the Code of Hammurabi, and it was the first public display of laws that had only ever been spoken or had cultural expectations around them before. And it was a goal of making rules kind of external, consistent, inspectable in some way. There was a huge leap forwards in the way that the policies were codified. But as you can imagine, had some downsides too, had some flaws. These were very inflexible, quite literally etched into a rock, and hard to interpret the edge cases. Not many examples of how they should be applied. Not a system to maybe apply them and make judgment about the edge cases. So, we jump forward. We've got systems created to try and tackle some of these flaws and gaps. Like, for example, being the idea of case law, where there was a level of interpretation on laws and policies that allowed also for the evolution of those, depending on culture and judgments. And these were publicly written, explicit rules again, but that could be interpreted and built upon. The flaws of this being very centralized. You can't scale this kind of decision making. We have to be in a courtroom with a judge. It's not something that is going to change at scale a complex system. So then we move to kind of operational processes. Examples being early hospital triage protocols and forms, checklists, escalation path, things that we really take so much for granted in any kind of business or operational setting. But the take home here being that policies had became kind of operationalized into these repeatable, scalable processes, but had flaws of would become out of date over time, fragmented in different parts of organizations. Then we've got the computer, software, and deterministic rule engines took off. Still, we think we know and love these. These are what drives a lot of the backbone of healthcare operations today. Claims adjudication rules in healthcare, for example. And this is really about, as we of course all wrestle with day in day out, policies being codified and something a machine can produce a decision from, but has all of the lovely maintenance burden and edge case analysis and no room for judgment. Rules must be able to be computed. They can't be something which requires a level of human judgment. So we tried with machine learning then to inject this kind of probabilistic interpretation. Clinical risk prediction based on a lot of clinical inputs. It's policy shift from this explicit set of rules to learnt behavior, but introduce kind of new and novel challenges. But we've seen lots of examples of poor application of this in healthcare. Kind of opaque decision making, non-determinism, broad brush decisions into kind of buckets of populations that is delivering kind of inequitable outcomes. So what's next? We've got AI changing so much of the way that we work and the way we think about decision making. This feels like it kind of upends and yet introduces yet another disruption to the process of policies and their application. So I'll hand to Saul to run through some of the things that we've learned about applying policies in the age of AI.
Thanks, Sam. Yes, the thing that's changed in just a few years, or if even that, is the advent of LLMs, of course. And for the first time, you get this promise that computers will be able to really do the complex clinical reasoning over unstructured data with reliably, consistently, with transparency, really taking into account all of that context at scale, all of the benefits of the computerized systems, but doing the pieces that up until now humans have been the only people who could do. And it's really what we've been trying to do for decades is take these policies, the messy combination of rules, context, and judgment, and make it computable, and now we can. So if we want the policies to be computable by AI, then exactly what do we have to do? What are the steps that we have to take to take these policies meant for humans and transform them into something that AI can use? And the real question is what happens when the policies are structured with enough nuance and context that they can actually reflect how clinical decisions are made in the real world. And that's where it gets interesting, because once you have that foundation, a policy that's not just structured, but has the complete context, you can start to apply the AI in a fundamentally different way, not just to match rules like the rules engines and even the ML systems that we had before, but to actually reason and make complete end-to-end decisions over the policies and over unstructured data in real world applications, which something only humans have been able to do up until now. Of course, that's easy to say, but it's a much harder problem than it sounds at first. And I think we've seen, certainly with our customers, a lot of intense excitement when you first use ChatGPT to reason over a policy. But out of the box, and which is soon seen as you try to start to apply some aspect of scale to it, you're not getting from those LLMs the consistency, transparency of the decision-making process. It can be almost like a black box, sort of waiting, thinking, and then giving you a result is not going to cut it for healthcare. Clinical accuracy, scale of cost, of latency, of the amount of tokens that you use. And all of this means that you need to think very carefully about how policies are represented and stored within our systems. It's not going to be enough just to have a PDF or the FHIR questionnaires that we were using for the DTR that we've talked so much about. There's more to it. And perhaps the biggest thing that we wanted to say is missing in this process so far is context, clinical context. One way we talk about this is the huge difference that there is between someone who starts at an organization on day one, their first day in the job, applying rules that they're taken from a book, versus someone who's been at that job, working there for 10 years, seen the full spectrum of edge cases, has the institutional knowledge, knows the pitfalls that might be coming ahead, knows what to do and what not to do. And AI out the box, you just use ChatGPT, you get that initial rush. That's more akin to that day one employee. And context is what I'm saying is the difference between that day one employee and that 10-year employee who's seen the pitfalls ahead. You need to build the surrounding tooling and workflows that can simulate the policy such that you know it's working correctly, monitoring that at scale, injecting that missing context where you don't have it, and and without that, you're never going to get the questions right, the answers to the questions right, to get that clinical accuracy that's so important. For example, and got here in this slide, if you can read it, can be really difficult questions that an AI could take a stab at answering, but really won't get unless you're expressing the way the clinical context should be interpreted, won't get the right answer and get that clinical quality to clinical's satisfaction scores. For example, we have a question pulled out here. There exists a normal inability for the patient to leave the home. It's impossible to answer that without considering the illness or injury in the context of the patient's overall condition and factor in diagnosis, duration of condition, clinical course, prognosis, nature and extent of functional limitations. Without that additional context of leading you to understand what a normal inability might be, then you're going to under or over infer and you won't hit that clinical accuracy. As a second example, leaving home requires a considerable and taxing effort. Considerable and taxing sounds completely subjective, but to a clinician with the experience, it isn't. They in these kind of home health cases, it's the language that's used explicitly in the documentation, but the sentence itself isn't supposed to be sufficient to meet the criteria. The clinician is expected to look at the context for specific evidence for supporting the statement. And that shift, moving from rules to reasoning, really bringing in the additional context into making a value judgment, is what unlocks the whole new set of capabilities across health plan operations. Sam, if you jump to the next slide. Awesome, thank you. It's what allows you to move beyond automating individual decisions and start to apply consistent clinical reasoning at scale and reduce variability across reviewers and actually understand how your policies behave in the real world, from prior authorization to payment integrity and beyond to all the myriad of use cases that we apply clinical guidelines to. And maybe most importantly, once the decisions are made through structured, observable reasoning, you don't just get automation, you can have visibility, you can analyze the consistency, you can identify edge cases and point to places inside the policy where sort of cruxes of decisions are made or perhaps could be improved. And you can even model the downstream impact of policy changes before they happen by testing on historical data, for example. In other words, policy stops being something you interpret and becomes something you can measure, test, and improve. And this slide here shows a case study we have with Geisinger Health Plan, WNS Health Help, and Anterior, where we transformed their prior authorization solution with AI to achieve the stats that here I won't list them all out, but we had a 50 to 70% reduction in turnaround time for escalated cases requiring clinical review. And beyond that, the data, beyond the statistics that we got through the case study, the data just keeps on growing because the longer you apply it, the more you learn. As you update policies, you can compare historical trends across policies, and the value just keeps on accruing. And so I'll pass back to Sam to say, okay, with all of this, what's the connection to the work we're already doing on CMS 0057?
Amazing, thanks all. So you've all been generous in indulging us through in thinking through how policies will be and are already being applied in the era of AI, and the kind of impact that it's driving with customers. So as Saul says, let's bring this back to the work that's happening across payers for the prior authorization APIs. Um, how does this relate to the policy digitization that we've all been thinking about for the creation of DTRs, for example? And 0057 is a push in the same direction in many ways. It's forcing the industry to digitize policies, and I think that's great. Everyone is already thinking about this. I think what we find to be great when we work with new customers, it's already part of the plan for 2026. Organizations are setting themselves up to add value. Um, the question we often then ask is how to approach the process of creating these DTR fire questionnaires in the kind of broader context of what can be achieved with policies and the use of them externally and across health plan operations. Okay, there's this other use case that we've got and we need to solve by the end of the year. How should we think about that? So uh, there's one way, which is to painstakingly translate that policy into a questionnaire that you can then compare answers to. Um, but we've seen we're working with customers and sort of the point of view which has emerged in those relationships and through trial and error, is that this risks a huge provider lift. I think that there was a lot of conversation at Weedy last year, of kind of the skepticism of the impacts that CQL will have in production, at least initially, when pre-filling these questionnaires with different EMR configurations. Do you really want to have a long list of questions, the answers to with which the provider or maybe the administrative staff don't have the answers easily available? That I think is one of the risks that needs to be mitigated when taking that approach. A, a big one that Saul touched on a lot is many of the questions in these policies aren't able to be automated as kind of traditional computer age static rules. They require the clinical judgment and context that we've been talking about today. And there are some ways that you could try and squeeze that into the DTR and put that complexity on the provider, but unlikely the administrator who may be completing that submission will have the right information. You greatly lose that oversight and that kind of best practice and opinion that the plan has itself on the determination of these questions if you put it into the DTR questionnaire. And another piece that's been quite interesting that we've worked closely with a number of our customers on is converting this to a very narrow set of questions without the additional clinical information, relying on these attestations without supporting evidence, is that you start to lose valuable context about the member. And a lot of our customers are, today we use this in so many of our downstream use cases for flagging, for care and case management, for work on appeals and grievances, on other work, on quality measures. But if you want to collect that as in addition to the attestation you're seeing and the information in the questionnaire, it starts to feel like maybe double work on the provider. And overall, many plans are aiming for this for an 80% auto approval rate, and all of these surface, I think, big hurdles in achieving that. That that I think is important to have the conversation in these groups of how what are some of the ways to mitigate that. So thinking about then the way we work with our customers on this, especially in the context of how powerful these AI-ready context-complete policies can be for future automation and acceleration. How can we reconcile these two pieces? So the way Anterior approaches this and suggests our customers do is an interconnected but separate two-step process to achieve both the digitization of policies in use for agentic use cases for automating workflows, but also in the creation of DCR5 questionnaires in service of compliance and reduction of provider burden. But we really view the primary outcome we're driving towards is this context-complete agent-ready version of the policy that's ready for automated or human-in-the-loop decision-making. This is the North Star. And from there, you can get complete flexibility over how you then generate the DTR questionnaire from it. You really want this process to be flexible, that you've got something which is a true representation, and then from there you can make decisions of what you do and don't include in the DTRs. What if there's a particular code which could have been approved programmatically, but providers are confused about the way that this DTR is laid out based on being very true to life of the original policy? The solution may be to change the way you gather information or ask questions, all of which don't and shouldn't require a change to your policy, but how you then display that and configure that in your DTR. You want these things to be separate, such that you have the kind of flexibility going forward. And I think we are so excited about the transformation, transformative potential of these kind of digitized policies across more than just medical necessity reviews and prior authorization. There's so many uses that it's critical to not jump to a format which is lossy and may lose critical context, and kind of focus on that as being a source of truth by focusing just on the DTR use case. And we think this approach helps answer those three concerns we raised in the last slide of provider burden, the configuration options to choose only what is required to gather the data you need, and flexibility and ability to experiment to ensure that you're getting the right balance between information gathering and answering questions and programmatic determination within the EHR or on the provider side. Two, ensuring decisions requiring clinical judgment happen within your control. We can still enable automation of approvals using this agent-ready format that's ready for reasoning over AI, and that's really the bread and butter of what we do at Anterior. But you don't need to relinquish control of that and oversight of the way that policies are being applied. As Saul said, some parts of these policies can be extremely ambiguous, and you have best practices that you have developed over many years, and you can maintain the level of oversight on that. And three is kind of biasing to collecting unstructured but rich clinical data to ensure you can best serve your members in downstream departments, especially in care and case management, disease management, chronic care, chronic condition management, etc. And I think kind of to start to move to conclusion, Anterior, we believe we are the industry leader in the creation of the initial agent-compatible format, and together with our colleagues at WEDI and our customers, we've worked to directly convert into the correct formulation of these DTRs from this structure to best serve their needs, the provider's needs, and most importantly, of course, the experience for the member that allows you to set yourself up for a path for broader AI transformation and still meet the needs of the mandate that, of course, we're working towards the time crunch of the end of the year. So to wrap up, our customers are realizing value by putting the effort of digitization into making policies initially AI ready, such that you kind of get details almost for free and have complete flexibility. And we're so excited about the positive impact we're seeing across across plans and for members and for providers, as we saw in the case study, for efficiency gains, kind of visibility over of a per question level, how policies are being applied and impacting members. As Saul mentioned, the proactive process of modeling changes to policies against retrospective cases using AI, our synthetics pipeline, to understand what changes in the yearly updates are going to affect, and this kind of deep analytics and visibility across how it's used in other parts of the organization, not just in one particular use case in the DTR setting. So I think in conclusion, we're super excited about the opportunity together with our customers and the great folks and colleagues that we work with in this group and beyond, to not just view 0057 as a checkbox, but if done right and thought about in a broader sense, it really can be the first step to this much broader and very exciting and impactful AI transformation. So we'll leave it there, and would love to take any questions. And thank you so much for the time.
Yes, thank you, Sam and Sal. That was great. Yeah, so having those standardized APIs is good and necessary, but it doesn't really do much unless payers are able to make fast and accurate decisions, to get back to the provider in a timely way. So great to see how some of that's shaking out on the payer side. So we do, fortunately, now have some time for questions. So if anybody would like to ask anything to the presenters, and I see we also have Dr. Mustafa Sultan as well, your colleague there from Anterior, so he might be able to pop in and answer some stuff as well. But if anybody does have questions, feel free to type that in the meeting chat, or just raise your hand. We should be able to unmute you. But I'll take the co-chair's prerogative and ask the first question. In terms of AI safety, some people have taken the position that these AI tools should never be used for automated denials, that they should only be used for automated approvals, and then any potential denial would have to get reviewed by a responsible human. So do you folks have a perspective on that? I mean, I know as a vendor it's maybe not really your decision, but is there guidance that you would give to health plans on that front?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we firmly believe and take the stance that AI should only be used for approvals, automation of approvals. We do not automate denials. We either approve or escalate to a clinician, to kind of revert to the old process to look through and to make a determination. So absolutely, we feel strongly about that, especially I think with our clinician roots, and our responsibility to the industry and to AI safety.
Can I ask a follow-up question then? Is there any sort of closed loop training, when a human nurse or doctor does a review, or peer-to-peer and overturns an initial automated denial decision? Like, do you have a way to sort of feed that back in to improve the decisions going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll let Saul jump in as well on some of the deep technical pieces. Yes, absolutely. So we aim to automate as many of approvals as we can do. If we take the Geisinger Health case study, really pushing that as close to the previous approval rates when things were done completely manually as possible. And then anything that's escalated, as we said, it depends on the customer's preference, but we offer a human-in-the-loop solution for those cases that get escalated, to accelerate that review of oversight by a human. The clinician reviewing that case can then provide feedback on the output of the, let's say, medical necessity review action that has produced an output. That then feeds back into the system. There's a few ways that we use it. So we don't do any fine tuning on unless with specific customer We don't need to get performance out of the box. What we find is really it's primarily about missing context. Our clinical teams with our customers work very closely together. And a classic example would be maybe there's an overturn on a question with respect to conservative therapy or conservative treatment. And often it's not that actually the answer was necessarily wrong. It's that the how that's defined and the context which is contained within the organization, of course, is not shared between the AI is reasoning over it versus the human. So then that's a process of agentically feeding that back into the additional context and ensuring the policy is growing in the way that we have it in our agent ready format, growing with that context to be able to reason accurately. So we have, I think we in terms of the way this has developed over time, a few years ago, this was very manual, our teams working together closely. We now have more of an approval step of the clinicians on our side or on the customer side to confirm the missing context that the agent has inferred based on the human feedback, exactly to then improve accuracy going forward. Saul,
Yeah,
anything
great.
you'd add on to that?
Um, just to double click on one thing you said, which is that the ability to hand off to a human is very important, I think. Not only for reasons of getting to clinical accuracy, because you might need a human to step in at certain points, certainly in the case if you need to escalate, but also because customers and different health plans have different expectations of which pieces they would like automation to happen. Maybe they want some help at this stage, and maybe that expectation of where they want automation to happen will change over time or for different lines of business. So we've architected our platform so that for anything that can be done, it could be handled by a clinician, a human, or by an AI, and you were able to sort of dial backwards and forwards between each step of the workflow where you'd rather the AI to step in and provide guidance, or whether the AI was going to take over, or whether this is just best left to humans.
Hey, great. Thanks for clarifying that. So I do see a question on the chat from Raj. He's asking agent-ready policy to generating dynamic questionnaires. Is that presentation to providers dynamic based on context, based on clinical context? Not sure I
That's a great point,
understand. Okay.
Raj. It's exactly, yes. We didn't go that deep actually. I think we left it out on purpose in not wanting to get too technical, but that's exactly right. Yes. So the ability to serve a dynamic DTR, which can change based on your previous answers and give you a next set of questions in the bundle, is exactly what you could do with the AI reasoning over clinical history as well as your answers to give you a dynamic response and potentially get straight through the medical necessity review provider side if you can get to an easy approval path. Yes, really pushing the intelligence right to the provider.
Great. And Raj is also asking, what is the feedback loop to the agent? So I think you may have already covered some of that in my questions. I don't know if you had anything more, though, to add about feedback loop to the agent.
I think we pretty much covered that in terms of that's really dependent on the customer how they would like to set up the workflow, and that can be different depending on lines of business, even let alone just a whole customer. And yes, we're able to get that feedback loop directly, so the agent is able to always monitor what's happening and incorporate that into feedback to our clinical review team who are doing QA on all of our work, and also to clinical QA for observability for the customer as well for the clinical team within the health plan. Yes, all of the data is always available both to the agent and to the reviewers.
Yep, sounds good. All right, I've got another question on the chat from my fellow co-chair, Dino. He's asking, what process does your team have to approve AI processes or improvements? Is there a team or a leader of AI ethics in the loop?
There absolutely is. We, in fact, Sam, you could probably speak more to this as Dr. Khadijah's on your team, but we've recently published a paper on bias evaluation over the kinds of AI clinical reviews that we do. We take it very seriously. That clinical team that we have working very closely with my AI engineering team, that's their responsibility. And yes, it's core to everything we do.
Yes.
If you've got a link to that paper handy, maybe somebody could throw it in the chat. Oh,
Oh,
looks
yes.
like Mustafa did it. Thank you.
To quick off the mark.
Yeah.
Yes, and just to add onto that, um, the some of the kind of AI governance and operational pieces to ensure that we have coverage across all of the decision making that's taking place. We have a team who is sampling production cases and labeling for analysis to ensure we're upholding clinical SLAs and catching any drift. We scale that with many techniques like LLM as judge to spot outliers, etc. And these kind of results are looked at on we put together papers like the one Mustafa has linked, but on a rolling basis in an AI governance committee that's very cross-functional across legal and product and clinical and outside advisors and folks who've been wrestling with these kind of problems of large decision-making systems at scale and for years. So absolutely, it's our top priority is patient safety, and we take a very rigorous analytical approach to it, as this is emerging technology and needs to be taken very seriously.
Great, makes sense. So we do still have a few more minutes if anybody else has further questions for the Anterior folks. Again, you can either type that in the chat or ask to be unmuted here. But otherwise, if there are no final last-minute questions, I will thank our presenters. Again, thank you, Sam and Sal from Howard. Very interesting, timely topic on how to use AI on the payer side to really make the CMS-0057 rules effective. So with that, I think we can close it here, and I'll just turn it back over to you, Michael, to close things out.
Appreciate it, Nick. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Saul, Sam, thank you for a great presentation. This has been a Weedy Emerging Technology Subwork Group Virtual Spotlight. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank you.